Hey guys, Matthew, and today I want to bring you guys an updated version of my most budget POB when it comes to ore stacking. So after losing my entire build, I decided to remake it, and basically I'm going to be making it in incremental because I want to figure out what is the cheapest potential 6k plus delving viable ore stacker build. But before that, I decided to remake the very budget build and the changes that I've learned about through the league as I did lots of ore stacking related path of buildings and all that stuff. So I wanted to give you guys an update on what it looks like basically the little changes here and there that I made that I think are going to be very important for you guys when it comes to ore stacking on a very tight budget, because this is insanely cheap. As you can see, for example, the budget POB had like less than 3,000 ES. We're sitting at comfortably at 3.6 thousand. We don't run a Headhunter, so I can actually showcase what the build looks like. So what we're going to be doing is 100% Delirious T16 map. So this is a Burial Chambers, but we are running a Terror Watchstone, so for +1 level. We have double Beyond on this map, I believe. So yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, there's no crazy mods. There's monster damage again from the thing, but that's really it. So this is not going to be the craziest clear in the world, and I'm not going to be doing the whole map because obviously 100% of those maps are pretty long to clear if you got to pick up everything. So I'm just going to show you guys that it can be done even on this small of a budget. So let's get right into it. And yeah, I just want to showcase the fact that it literally can be done. It looks like I don't have RF on.
There once was a
so yeah, it's not going to be the craziest, one-shotting the whole screen clear you've ever seen in the world. But again, for the budget that we're working with here, which is literally the cheapest potential ore stacker budget you could ever come up with, I would say that it does fairly well. So I'll just clear like the first part of the map, and we're just going to skip the rest. So because I want to get into POB and everything else. So you can see it kills like yellow beasts. It takes a little bit sometimes. I mean, it depends on the mods, obviously. This is 100% Delirious.
That was a juicy one,
so it's normal to be expected that sometimes we'll take some damage. Sometimes stuff won't instantly die. But you have to remember that on this build, at the current state of the build, I do not have a single alternate quality gems, and I do not have a single awakened gem either. As you can see, we are completely capable of killing the bosses, Kosis or the Omni or whatever, in 100% Delirious. This is a 83 map, so a T16, as I said, because we are upgrading the level of the map itself, of the area. So it looks like we died. I believe we died to a Chaos Projectile. This is going to be one of the biggest issue with this build. On the smallest budget is going to be the fact that we are not going to be incredibly tanky against chaos resistance unless we get very good clusters. Even in the cheap side of things, if we got very good cheap clusters, which we don't particularly have, our clusters for the most part are pretty trashed here. As you can see, our suffixes are just almost completely useless. But once I get into POB part of the video, which we're just about to jump into, I'll be able to talk about that, why that is. So this showcase was level 95. I am level 100, but I went ahead and de-leveled myself, or well, I went ahead and removed 5 nodes on the tree so that I could showcase around level 95. Now, the difference between level 95 and level 100 is going to be about 300 energy shield and in the ballpark of 20 to 30% more damage. So levels are very important when ore stacking. 95 is the lowest level that I did this POB at, because 95 is where I got this estimated physical damage reduction to 54% sitting AFK in my hideout. Now, initially, I normally tell people that they shouldn't be making ore stackers or switching to ore stacking before around these levels, because the biggest problem is that you will not have enough physical damage reduction. So for example, the initial POB was level 92, but as you can see at level 92, my estimated physical damage reduction is only 41%. Now, of course, I do run a Basalt, so that gives me an additional 15%, which brings it to 56, and I have 3 endurance charges for 12%. So that goes all the way to 80%. Or, sorry, 68%, my bad. But this 68% is not super, super big. So if you were to just get a few more levels, right? If you were to just get a little bit more levels, you could actually instead get the 54%, which then goes to 69 with the flask, and then goes to over the 90% physical damage reduction threshold with the usage of endurance charges, because we do have endurance charge on kill on the build. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you're going to be trying to play Ore Stacker, I would say the minimum level that you would normally want, if you want to be able to do 100% Delirious without too many issues, is level 95 is what I would recommend. You can switch before. You can probably switch around level 88 even, but don't expect to be able to do 100% Delirious content at that level. Now, of course, if I could go ahead and refund myself another, 5 passives or so and be level 90 or whatever, and then I could probably easily do things that are not that hard. So, for example, I could get myself 9 passives. This would be level 91. Now my physical damage reduction would be very, very low, but for example, if I wanted to do a Guardian map, that would be incredibly, incredibly easy. So I guess I'll go ahead and showcase that real quick. So let's get like a decent map going. Nothing crazy though. Real quick. So it looks like I'm out of alterations. That's a little bit annoying. My bad for the lack of preparation. Alright, so it looks like we have like 88% monster life, blah blah blah. You'll see that a map like this, which is like 100 times easier than a 100% Delirious T16, is going to be literally a piece of cake. Even at this level, you'll see that like we're just gonna walk through the whole map. It's not a big deal. Even the boss would be incredibly easy, but like there's no real danger. You could probably sit AFK here. Oh well, maybe not if Shaper Balls hit you, but you're not gonna take any substantial amount of damage, because obviously this kind of content is completely irrelevant for a build like this. These builds are not made to do this kind of content. They're made to do the highest tier of content, such as 100% Delirious. So that's why we're like one-shotting everything. There's no real danger ever. Very, very easy. Blighted maps would also be the same. If you were to do like T16 blighted maps, it would feel like a joke, even at like around level 90-ish. Because again, these builds are not built for this kind of content. They're built for the highest tier content, like 100% Delirious, as showcased earlier. So now that I've showcased the build and what it can do, let's get into the POB. Let's talk about interactions, let's talk about upgrades, and let's talk about everything there's to talk about. So, instead of just running a regular random POB, we're going to go ahead and use my own POB, which is going to be my own character, so you guys can see exactly the kind of damage that we're dishing. Because a lot of people were saying last time in the other build guide that, the damage that was being showcased was a lot more than the damage that they were doing, and I'm not sure how that happened. So let's go ahead and just, get ourselves to around level 95, because that's what I think is going to be the best to do. I think anything below that is probably not super recommended when it comes to ore stacking. So this is 78. We're going to grab all this. This brings us to 87. All of that brings us to 93. Now I don't really care about cold res, so I think I'll grab these for the regen, because fire res is also kind of useless. So as you can see, we are level 95. Now let's have a look at what kind of damage we're doing. So we are going to enable our flasks. Obviously our flasks are going to be quite a bit of damage. We're not running a bottled faith because this is a budget version. Let's go instead and enable grace, remove Val Grace, enable hastes, and enable righteous fire. Again, we are going to also enable power charges, frenzy charges, endurance charges, and inspiration charges. We also have onslaught, we have phasing, we are leeching energy shield because of our large cluster jewel, which I'll go over in a second. We're probably on consecrated ground, And our crit chance is lucky, of course. The enemy is ignited, the enemy is shield and on consecrated ground, and the enemy is Cyrus. So, our Cyrus DPS is 19.4 million. Now, this is not an incredibly high amount of damage, but as you saw, 19 million damage is enough to be able to clear 100% delirious content without too big of a without too many issues. The only problem is going to be our chaos resistance. As you can see, it's only 36, which is why I died in that map. I believe I got killed by a chaos projectile. So if the moment you don't have your flasks up, this 36% it goes to 1%, because obviously Azirius Promise gives us 35 chaos reds. So you really want to be sure to keep very, very good uptime on all of your flasks for this build. It is pretty important, because they are also giving you survivability through the use of, for example, Cinder Swallow. We are enabling Cinder Swallow through the use of a Mantra of Flames with 1% mana reserve. But honestly, I think this jewel, ever since I mentioned it in the video, has gained way too much in terms of price. And a regular Abyss jewel with fire damage to spells would be significantly cheaper, and you could maybe even potentially get energy shield on the Abyss jewel, so that would be a lot better than a Mantra of Flames in any way, because you only need 1 fire damage on the entire build to enable the 10% increased damage from Cinder Swallow, which is as you can see, 10% more damage. The flask gives us 12%, so pretty good. All right. So, 19 million, not crazy on the damage, but let's go over the build and how I built it. So, the Nebulous is, again, like I said, we got lucky on the Divine, we got a 20-20 roll, but if you had like 18-18 or 18-19, it would still be very fine. The cast speed doesn't matter. I got Chaos Resistance on the Implicit because it helped a tiny little bit with our Chaos Resistance issues, but that's it. Prism Guardian does not have anything special on it. Alpha Howl either. The Shavs also doesn't have anything special on it. The Malagaros also don't. The Voidwalkers are the Pierce version. Now, you could go with the Chain version if you wanted to. That is really up to you. The replica Voidwalkers would give you Chain instead. The rest of the boots would be the same. The Amulet is just Vitality and 6% Mana Reserve. The Anoint is Champion of the Cause, which I think is something I forgot to mention in the last video, with a crafted % energy shield. We bought this amulet for 10 exalt, and it was basically the cheapest you could get. You don't need this 20% energy shield, but it's a very good way to get, fairly tanky, because we are not super tanky in the early levels of the build. As you can see, we're rocking 3.5k ES. There's one thing to note about that I'll mention in a bit, though. Call of the Brotherhoods don't have any corruptions. They're 48% conversion, though, through the usage of the Turbulent Catalyst for elemental damage. That's it. Nothing crazy there. We're running a Baited Breath. The Baited Breath is a very good defensive build. As you can see, it gives us 424 energy shield. So it is a very good way to get energy shield on the build. Now, if you have a Headhunter, which I would obviously recommend, it is much better. Slap on a Headhunter, and the lack of energy shield is not going to matter whatsoever. But obviously this belt carries pretty hard in terms of defense, especially early in the game, and this is literally a 1 chaos belt. Running a Basalt Flask for the physical damage reduction. As you can see, we're sitting pretty at 89% physical damage reduction when we have Val Haste up. So without Val Haste, we are sitting at a 85% physical damage reduction, so still pretty decent there. We're not quite capped, but again, with such a low aura effect, we're barely over the threshold of 4.0. It's to be expected, and this again is level 95 currently. If we drop down on some levels, we are going to drop down on our physical damage reduction. If you wanted to see at level 92, for example, at level 92, we would be sitting at 71% physical damage reduction. So there is a pretty big jump in terms of tankiness when you reach that 4.0 threshold, which is why this PoB is all about reaching the 4.0 threshold before literally anything else. So going back into here, again, our flask, Basalt Flask, Cinder Swallow is actually a Diamond Flask, so we're running a Diamond Flask. This gives us, obviously, our crit chance is lucky, so all our crit rolls are rolled twice. So you could say that pretty much doubles your crit chance. As you can see, our effective crit chance is 79%, while our actual crit chance is like 54. So our effective crit chance is pretty decent. It's obviously not crazy high, but that's just going to be how it is when we are on such a small budget. 80% crit chance is still good enough to shatter just about everything, so we're fine. Running a Taste of Hate for the defensive properties, but also because it gives us a little bit more damage. Azirius Promise is very good for damage, and also the 35 Chaos Res is pretty massive. Cinder Swallow is also very good for crit chance. If we didn't have that, our crit chance would be very low. So we definitely want to be running a Cinder Swallow. And it's really good for sustain because of the ES when you kill an enemy and mana. This recover is different from regen, so you could actually do, for example, a no regen map will still be fine on this build if you're able to kill enough with the Cinder Swallow earn up, because the recover is completely different stats. Now, let's go over the tree and the jewels. So we are rocking the same exact jewel than we were in the initial build, a Practice Caster, Essence Rush, and Burden Projection. Practice Caster gives us the chance to avoid interruptions from stuns while casting. This is very good for defense, especially on the kind of budget that we're looking at here. Then we also have, let's see, we have an Essence Rush. This gives us a lot of sustain. It gives us spell damage, leech, and energy shield. Which is the biggest reason why we use it. And also it gives us a little bit of damage while leeching, so why not? Then we're rocking 2 of the 7 stat voices, because again, we're going with the budgetest of the budget, and this is as cheap as it's going to get. So let's go ahead and enable this back on. The medium clusters are all going to be the same. So they're all going to be between level 1 and 67. The reason why is because at level 1 you can roll first among equal, and you can roll 25% increased effect, such as this, and all the way up to 67. Now the reason why is because at 68 you get to roll a lot more mods on these cluster jewels, which makes it significantly harder to roll jewels like this. The goal on every single one of your jewels is to get first among equals and 25% effect. So that's what I have on most of them. I'll go ahead and quickly showcase. This one is Chaos Res. These were all self-crafted with about 700 alterations, by the way. All 8 of the clusters that I'm about to show took about 700 alterations to craft. So very easy to craft. It's about 100 alterations each. Now, of course, with the current price of alterations, that's a couple or a few exalts, about 3x worth of alterations or so. But at the start of a league, that is not even 1 exalt worth of alterations. At least if we go with past league prices. So very cheap to roll these clusters. Also note that these clusters are basically very cheap at the beginning of the league, because nobody uses them and nobody makes ore stackers super early. So you can get these clusters for a few chaos each. While for the budget build that I made yesterday, I paid 2.5 exalt each for these bases and rolled them myself. So clearly there's a pretty big price difference at this point in the league, now that, you know, everybody's making ore stackers and, you know, these clusters are in crazy demand. So yeah. But what you're going for is first among equals with 25% increased effect. The best way to do that is to just alteration spam. Whenever you get first among or 25%, you hit it with a regal. There's a pretty decent chance that it hits the missing stat, and then you're done. If you can get a good suffix cool, like for example, this one we got chaos resistance. This one we got cold resistance, completely useless. This one we got regen, which is, I guess it's okay. It gives us a little bit more regen, but it's whatever. This one we got fire resistance, completely useless. All attributes was actually kind of good for me because I needed the strength, as you saw earlier. For Dread Banner, which is an addition in the build, which I'll be talking about when we go over to the skill gems. This one is 3 dexterity, completely useless. This one has 3 intelligence, which is just a little bit more mana and also a little bit more energy shield. But honestly, 3 is like it's not that great for real. 9 intelligence is just not much. And this one does not even have first among equals because we rolled 3% chaos res. And it had a bad notable, so I actually annulled the bad notable, and I decided to roll with it because an additional node meant an additional 3% chaos resistance, which is pretty good on this build. So that's where we're going most. That's where we're getting most of our chaos resistance. As you can see, we're getting about we're getting a pretty decent chunk from here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 15 chaos resistance from here, 12 chaos resistance from here, and then our flask gives us another 35, and the nebulous gives us 10, which is where we get all our chaos resistance. But it's still very, very low. Now, if I was going for perfect jewels, and if I wasn't lazy, I would have kept rolling these clusters until I got maybe 1 or 2 more with chaos resistance on them, because it's so easy to do that, especially when alterations are giga cheap like early in the league. So that would have been the way to go. So now what wait, we haven't talked about the cobalts yet. So let's go over the cobalt, all the remaining jewels, I guess. So what I did in this build is, since we're not running a rare belt, we're running a bit of breath, and since we're not running a headhunter, one of the biggest issues is that we don't have enough strength at all. We need a lot more strength to make this build viable or usable. So what I did is I spent about 10 to 20 chaos per cobalt jewel, and I got them all with 1% mana reserved with strength and intelligence. So obviously we weren't going to be able to afford percent energy shield jewels, because those are almost like 10x each. So we went for the cheapest that we could get, but we needed the strength really badly, because we're not getting strength anywhere, and Nebulous requires a decent bit of strength. Blood Magic requires 111 strength, so we needed quite a bit. So getting it on the jewels seemed like the easiest way to go about it, and instead of getting just strength jewel, I actually got strength and intelligence, because the intelligence basically acts as more energy shield as well as more mana. So very, very good budget jewel. So as you can see, 10 strength int, 1% mana reserve, 10 strength int, 1% mana reserve, nothing else matters. We're not using a cold skill or whatever, so the multi don't matter. It's just 10 strength and ints. Here we got a Mantra of Flames with 1% mana reserve, but as I mentioned earlier, an Abyss Jewel with 1% mana reserved and some fire damage to spells while holding a shield, or, with a mace or whatever. Something like that would have been a lot better. Or at least a lot cheaper, and potentially we could have gotten an energy shield on it. We got another one here, 8 strength and intelligence, nothing else. This one is 8 strength and intelligence. This one has knockback on hit, which can actually be a fairly nice in terms of defenses, because we have a lot of cast speed. So that 5% is actually pretty good for defense, but it's absolutely not mandatory. I didn't look for it. It was just kind of there when I bought the jewel. 9 strength and intelligence, reduced mana cost of skill. This one has a bit of crit chance, but again, not mandatory. I didn't even look for that. This one, so once I reached my strength threshold that I was required, which was 111, I decided to try to get a little bit more chaos resistance on the build to increase survivability. So for the last 2 jewels, what I got is just chaos resistance by itself. So chaos resistance, 1% mana reserved, and that's it. The shock and the attack speed completely doesn't matter, and here the cold res, the evasion, the attack speed, or whatever also don't matter. These jewels were a little bit of a splurge. They were about 1 exalt each, but honestly, it is so worth it, because as you saw on that 100% delirious map, we did die. Everything was going fine. Obviously we were taking some hits here and there, but everything was going mostly fine until we got a big chaos hit, which just completely annihilated us, which is bound to happen, especially if your flasks aren't up. So getting a little bit of extra chaos resistance on your jewels is pretty good. We are rocking a Ring of Blades with Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you. This is where we get our Corrupted Blood immunity. It's also 20C for this jewel. I bought that yesterday, so very common, very cheap. It's not like a 1% mana reserved. Even at the beginning of the league, a Corrupted Blood Ring of Blades is super common, and you could even make one yourself if you wanted to, because if you hit a 1% mana reserve, those are going to be pretty good, so you can actually sell that and make a bunch of money. Might of the Meek has nothing in terms of corruption. Our Watcher's Eye is a single stat physical damage converted to lightning. We also have energy shield recovery rate while affected by discipline, but that was actually an accident. I didn't even realize that was on the Watcher's Eye until after I bought it. So we got a 2 stat for the price of a 1 stat. I paid 10x for this Watcher's Eye. So pretty cheap there. And obviously the second stat is not what's keeping us alive or anything like that. It's just a nice little bonus. But all we care about is the physical damage to converted, and that has been going down and down and down in price because everybody's swapping over to Spark, since Spark is a pretty, you know, significantly better build. So 10 exalt for this one. And finally, we are using a Conqueror's Efficiency for the 2% mana reserved, and there is no corruption on it that matters. The effect of non-damaging elements is useless. And that is basically what we're rocking in terms of the tree. The tree is a standard tree. We got, you know, 3 voices. We're getting charge on kill. This is, again, like I mentioned earlier, where we get our power, frenzy, and endurance charges. We only get 3%, which is not super big, but if you're running content like 100% layers, maps, and stuff, you're basically gonna have permanent uptime on all charges because there's so many monsters to kill. And that's mostly it. So the last thing we need to talk about is the skills. So a lot of people in my super budget build were saying that they were having issues hitting the 90% resistance threshold. So this is level 95 and I'm at 90%. I can actually keep this 90% even at level C. The minimum is 92. So this is why, as you can see right here, if I drop this a little bit, as you can see, level 92. So the lowest level that I would ever recommend to swap to aura stacking would be 92, because this is where you would reach the threshold of the 90% all res. As you can see, it is a fairly big buff to our damage hitting that threshold, but it's also a massive buff to our survivability and whatnot. So definitely something I would recommend is to swap at level 92 with my current setup. So at level 92 we have 90% all res, and at level 95 obviously we keep that 90% all res, but our damage is going to be pretty significantly better. So 95 is what I would normally recommend. So let's talk about the skills. We're rocking an Alpha Howl. So in the Alpha Howl, we're going to take advantage of it by putting our purities in there, because our purities are going to gain 2 extra levels. It won't do a tremendous amount. As you can see, if I lower the level of the purities, they will still remain 90% on the all res. So technically you don't need to socket them in your helmet. It's just there's nothing else to really put there. So I'm using a level 20 purity of fire, ice, and lightning with a level 20 precision as well. Precision in the helmet is pretty good because extra levels on precision add a tiny bit of damage, but also a little bit of crit. So precision is definitely something you want to have in your helmet. In the weapon, we are using a leap slam with faster attacks and dread banner. Now, the reason why we use dread banner is because it is very good for survivability. As you can see, this nearby enemies have 18% less accuracy rating is actually multiplied by your aura effect. So if you pay attention here to the evade chance at 56%, which is because of grace, it goes up to 83% with dread banner. So it is a very good defensive layers for hits that are from, you know, close, especially big hits. This will save your life a ton, and it is you know, doesn't cost literally anything. It has a 10% mana reserved, and it does count as an aura. As you can see, our physical damage reduction goes up whenever we put it on. So dread banner is a very solid thing that I had not put into the budget PoB initially. In the shield, obviously, we're going to go Wrath, Zealotry, Hatred. There's really nothing else to put there. If you can afford some higher level on your Hatred, Wrath, and Zealotry, go for it. But it won't do much because you already get 2 levels on the Prism Guardian itself. So level 21 gems don't actually add a whole lot of damage because your gems are already 22, and 23 is not really a big threshold. But every bit matters, so why not? In the boots, we are going to be running our blood magic setup. So as you can see, 2020 blood magic. We're not running the the alternate quality versions or anything because this again is a budget build. We're running Val Grace and Val Haste. Now, I'm not a fan of Grace. I remove it from almost all PoBs, but on this kind of budget, Val Grace carries pretty hard. Not because of the Grace part so much, but because of the Val Grace part. Val Grace allows you to basically face tank anything because it gives you literally 75% dodge and spell dodge. And once you put that, you pair that up with your 83% evade chance, your regen, and all that good stuff, the 90 RS and whatever. Whenever you do have Val Grace up, your not quite immortal, but you can basically just sit there when Kosis is doing whatever he wants, like 100% delirious Kosis, and you're able to just literally sit there and ignore him entirely, because he doesn't do anything at all to you, because you're just dodging literally every hit. So whenever you're about to engage a boss, I would highly recommend popping your Val Grace and try to, you know, nuke the boss down as fast as possible. Pop all your Val skills, Val RF, blah blah blah, and just go ham. But otherwise, I normally don't have it ticked because I don't think it's something that you would normally use during your regular mapping. But that's that. Then obviously Val Haste. Val Haste is a no-brainer. Move speed, attack speed, cast speed. And we're not running the alternate qualities because, again, very budget setup. Since our mana reserve is not super crazy good, our clarity is only potentially able to reach level 13, but we still have, as you can see, about 200 mana regen with over 200, you know, unreserved mana. So even if it's not crazy good, because our mana buffer is very high, the mana regen is actually fine the way it is, even with the level 13 clarity. The skill gem setup is we have an EK. I have a level 21, which is pretty good for damage, but it doesn't have quality. So, you know, this was like 10C or something for level 21 ethereal knives with no quality on it. We're running an anomalous fist of lightning. This is the only alternate quality gem in the build, and realistically, it's actually not required at all. The only reason why I'm using it is because it allows you to do physical reflect map, because alongside the Watcher's Eye, you can get 100% of your physical damage to lightning, which then gets converted to cold with Call of the Red Hood. So that's why we run anomalous. Now at early in the league, again, it's not a big deal. Your damage barely changes if you have this or not. So if it's not available, say in another league, then whatever, it's not a big deal. But if it is, I would highly recommend it, because being able to do Fizz Reflect Map is a pretty big advantage. We're running Cold Penetration because we have no penetration anywhere else on the build. So that's where we get some pen. You know, we're not even running Awakened Cold Pen. Obviously, Awakened Cold Pen would be significantly better. But since I wanted to make the cheapest build ever, I'm not even running that. 2020 Arcane Surge, obviously very strong. 2020 Inspiration for the mana cost of the skill. Now, with such a buffer of mana, 227 unreserved mana, we don't necessarily need it. The mana cost of being 53 would still be perfectly fine. But Inspiration is also a pretty good seal gem, so that's why. And finally, Spell Echo 2020, obviously mandatory for any aura stacker. That's where we get like almost all our cast speed, so almost doubles our damage. That's going to be that. In the gloves, this is probably where everything. This is probably where the biggest changes happen from the old budget build. We are running gloves with an empowered setup with your discipline, so that gives our discipline level 22. Now again, since we're going with a super cheap build, we are running an empowered level 3, which is just a handful of chaos, or you could self-farm yourself if you're SSF or whatever. 23 level 20 discipline, not even 21, so obviously you could easily get a level 21 discipline, and that would give you like an extra 100 ES. But since we're going for super budget, we didn't do that. A level 20 smite, no phantasmal either. Phantasmal would be significantly more damage, but budget version. And finally, a level 20 Val Righteous Fire. Again, a level 21 would be pretty much, pretty good damage. And for very cheap. So, as you can see, at level 95, our build has 3,575 mana, but if you simply get a level 4 Empower and a level 21 Discipline, that goes up to almost 8,000, which is pretty good. Now, that being said, I do want to talk about an alternative real quick, and that is going to be to run some Phase Breakers, because Phase Breakers, because of the new divination card, which gives you double corrupted face breakers, can give you gloves like these. Now, what's crazy about gloves like these is that it basically touches all the different auras that are in your gloves. AoE affects your Righteous Fire, your Discipline, and your Smite. So I'll show you guys real quick what would happen if we were to put these into the build. You'll see that we gain 400 energy shield by adding these to the build. So, if I put these into the build, and then I swap my Maligaros to Phase Breakers, you'll see that our damage goes down a lot, but our energy shield shoots up to nearly 4,000 at level 95. Again, a level 4 in power and level 21 discipline, and we would be rocking 4.2k energy shield, which is pretty damn tanky for an ore stacker. Pretty damn tanky. Now the thing is though, our damage went down tremendously. Our damage went down a lot, and our crit multi is really, really bad now. So we have to make up for the crit multi. So the best way to do that, again, as I mentioned earlier, inspiration is not entirely needed currently. So what we could do is get increased critical damage on the build, and that would make up for a portion of that lack of damage, because our crit multi would go back up to about 300%, which is pretty good. But obviously our damage is, you know, a little bit lower than what it was. It was around 19 million, now it's around 17. So our damage definitely went down. But our energy shield is almost an entirely, it is almost 1,000 more energy shield. So it is definitely a good alternative for survivability if you're having issues with that, especially if you're not running the highest of content, so that you don't need the craziest of damage. So that's mostly what that's going to look like in terms of the two glove setup. Either you go Malagaros or you go face breakers with +4. So the reason why we say +4 is because +1 socketed gems applies to Empower, and then +2 AoE gems. But you could also go +2 Aura gems, and you could also go +2 duration gems. The only thing to note though is that if you go with +2 duration gems, you will need Val Discipline, because otherwise it will not apply to Discipline, but it will apply to Val RF because it's a duration gem, and Smite is also a duration gem. So it's really just the Val Discipline that would be different if you had duration gems as a corruption. And that's mostly it for the budget version. Now, a lot of people are going to be asking me how to upgrade this build. So the first thing that you'll want to do when it comes to upgrading the build is getting alternate quality gems. So the first thing that I would do, honestly, if I was to decide to invest fairly heavily into this build, is that I would put in Purity of Elements in here. Now, if I put in Purity of Elements in the helmet, clearly I'm going to need to remove something, so I would remove Purity of Fire. Now, I also would put Enhance, because I want to enhance the Purity of Ice and Purity of Elements, so I would also remove Purity of Lightning. So we're going to remove faster attacks here and go Purity of Lightning, and we're going to remove Dread Banner, and we're going to go Purity of Fire, because we don't really have a choice, to be honest, right? So we're going to put these at whatever default level 20. As you can see, we're back up to 90 all res if we do that. There's no real other places where you could do that. So that's that. Now, what's going to happen is that we are going to use Divergent Purity of Ice and Divergent Purity of Elements on 20 quality with a level 4 enhance. And as you can see, our damage basically doubles. That's all you have to do, and then your damage is literally twice as high. Because that's how OP those things are. Now, what happens here, that we have 33 million DPS, that we are getting a crazy amount of penetration. We get 8% cold pen plus 8%, so 16% times our aura effect, which is 4.0. So we're getting like 64% cold penetration. Is that at this point, this cold penetration gem here is really not that great anymore. So what happens then is that we drop cold penetration, we go back to increased critical damage, and now we go with the Facebreaker build. Now we're looking at 4.2k ES, nearly 30 million Cyrus DPS. Now note that this is not your real damage against Cyrus, this is just your Cyrus DPS in your config. And at that point your build is pretty much very strong. And the other upgrades are going to be, you know, however you want to put them. Our mana here is 92, so we're still plenty of mana to cast. And we could even get like an alternate quality precision to get either more damage or you know, to get more mana available. Honestly, I would probably just go Diversion because it's on enhance anyways. So we'd have 92 mana, 36 mana cost, and as you can see, 32 million DPS, which is over twice the damage that I showcased earlier in that 100% Delirious, where we weren't really having any issues with damage. Of course, some monsters were taking a little bit longer to kill, but now if you double the damage, all of a sudden everything is just going to fucking melt. So that would be the first upgrade. After that, it really is up to you. You could obviously just go for a Headhunter build. You could go for, you know, corruptions on your different pieces of gear. You could go for better voices, etc., etc., better clusters. That's all going to be up to you. But the initial thing that you're going to want to do is the Divergent Purities, because they were absolutely insane in terms of damage. Honestly, they're even a little bit OP, I would say. And that concludes my ore stacking guide. The price of this entire ore stacker, for anybody wondering, was 70 exalts. 68, if I remember correctly, or 70-ish exalts for the entire build. Now, of course, if you were to build it yourself, it would be pretty significantly cheaper. If you were to level the gems up yourself, for example, and a lot of the things, the prices have inflated a lot. For example, Call of the Brotherhood rings are 1.5 exalt. Early in the league, they were like 20C. You know, the Malgaro's gloves early in the league were 10C, now they're 3X. Even the Prism Guardian was like 2C at the beginning of the league, and now it's half an exalt. Nebulous is about the same price. Shavs has dropped down in price a little bit, but the biggest deal is the cluster jewels. They were significantly more expensive. My estimation is that you could build this entire character that I have running around here in the first week of the league for probably less than 30 exalts for the entirety of the build, which I think is very affordable for what it can do. And that was the reason why I was making this guide, and that was the reason why I wanted to explain the whole thing, is because obviously now that we're late into the league, it's not that big of a deal anymore. But for people who are intending to maybe league start as an ore stacker in a future league, or at least transition to ore stacker early in the league, this build is probably going to be your best bet, unless of course GG just guts the entire build. And on that note, oh, it looks like my patron little image actually failed, so I won't be able to show that to you guys. But I do want to say a huge thank you to all my patrons. Also, all the people who support me on different platforms, be it over at Twitch, on my stream, or on YouTube, or otherwise. Huge thank you to you guys. Hopefully you guys appreciate this video. Definitely been going on for a while now, and in terms of future videos, because this is going to be my final ore stacking related video that I'm making, at least for this league, because I don't want to bore you guys with just that. I'll be making a video about my delving experience, since I've delved past 6,000, so I've basically beat the game when it comes to delving, because delving ends at 6,000. After that, it's all the same from 6,000 to 65,000. So I'll probably make a video about everything I've learned going down, you know, getting downwards to over 6,000, my journey there, and you know, tips and tricks on how to delve and all that good stuff. So hopefully you guys are looking forward to that video, and that'll be Matthew signing out until the next one. Peace.